Professor Uriel Reichman, founding president and chairman of the board at Reichman University, Ambassador Huckabee, American ambassador to Israel, distinguished colleagues, honored guests, and dear friends. Since the worst attack of terrorism in modern times occurred in September 11, 2021, we are holding every year a memorial event for the victims of this atrocity at the ICT International Conference. On this event, we pause to remember. We remember this horrific morning when the skies above New York and Washington, D.C. filled with fire and smoke, when nearly 3,000 innocent lives were stolen in the blink of an eye, and when the world changed forever. For Americans, that day is attached with memory as a wound that will never fully heal. For us in Israel, the pain is deeply familiar because our own nation, too, has endorsed its own day of unspeakable horror on the 7th of October 2023. Hamas terrorists swept across our border, massacring entire families in their homes, killing children, women, and men without any mercy, and abducting hundreds into captivity. That day is engraved in our hearts and our darkest as our darkest hour, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Through these two tragedies are separated in oceans and decades, they are bound together by the same cruel logic of terrorism. Both were designed not only to kill, but to shock, to paralyze, and to shake the very foundation of free societies. Both targeted civilians, men and women, on the way to work in New York and families gathered in their homes in Israel, because terrorism has always thrived on the suffering of innocents. And in both cases, the perpetrator exploited human life itself as a weapon, turning crowded airplanes into missiles or hiding behind the civilians of Gaza, in hospitals, in schools, in civilian homes, to shield themselves from justice. Probably everyone old enough to remembers where they were in the morning of the 9/11. I happened to be in the United States, specifically in Palo Alto. I had been sent there at the request of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs to speak with the Americans and explain to them the difficult dilemmas that Israel was facing during the era of the Second Intifada, as we struggle to thwart the deadliest wave of terrorism, the suicide attack phenomenon. On the morning of the 9/11, I was scheduled to deliver a lecture entitled, quote, "Suicide Attacks, the Israeli Challenge." Yet, as the lecture began, the title suddenly felt anachronistic. Just a few hours earlier, the phenomenon of suicide attack was no longer merely an Israeli challenge, but had revealed itself as a global challenge. This is not the first time that strategies of international terrorism have been adopted from Palestinian terrorism. The world has already seen this with airplane hijacking, with lone wolf attacks, with suicide bombing, etc. For decades, Israel has tragically served as the experimental laboratory of global terrorism, where methods are first tested before spreading to the wider world. That is why experts everywhere must carefully examine the new form of terrorism unleashed by Hamas on the 7th of October, what I call the mass raid attack. In this unprecedented assault, hundreds, even thousands of terrorists infiltrating from an ungoverned territory into neighboring towns, villages, and kibbutzes, where they murder, torture, rape, and kidnapped innocent civilians. This horrific phenomenon, which devastated Israeli communities along the Gaza border, could one day be repeated elsewhere. One can imagine similar scenarios unfolding in European neighborhoods that border regions controlled and influenced by radical jihadist movements and their supporters. Local and global terrorism confront us with profound challenges. We face terrorism adversaries who recognize no borders, while we, as Western democracies, remain bound to the rule of law. We are forced to fight enemies who deliberately embed themselves among civilians, exploiting our morality to protect their immorality. We confront an ideology that does not die with its leaders, but mutate and spreads, carried on new platforms, in new languages, in new generations. This is not only a military struggle, it is a battle of ideas, of legitimacy, and values. The lessons from both 9/11 and 7th of October are clear. No nation can stand alone in this fight. We must share intelligence, connect the dots, and prevent the next attack before it happens. We must exchange experience and knowledge, from urban combat in Gaza to counter-radicalization efforts in Europe to aviation security in the United States. And together, we must confront the moral dilemma that terrorists forces upon us, so that we can defeat them who abuse civilians without betraying the values we are sworn to defend. And so, as we remember the victims of September of 11 and the 7th of October, we must also draw strength from this memory. May the memory of the victims be a blessing. May their families find comfort in knowing that the world has not forgotten. May our shared commitment to resist terror and defend freedom be living legacy we carry forward in their name. And may the Israeli hostages be released without delay and return to their homes. Amen.